Shalom. One of the things that I used to look forward to in Las Vegas when I was living there was the annual Martin Luther King March that was held with the support of local synagogues and churches. This event was held every February, which was nice. It was a little cooler in Vegas. It featured a bunch of various speakers, and it was always followed by a walk down a boulevard in North Las Vegas, which ended at the MLK statue at a local park. And why this was so empowering is because me and several of the other rabbis would walk with different priests and pastors. It was a really kind of ecumenical event. And I always felt inspired to do this event because I've read a lot about the friendship that Dr. King had with Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. Though they came from different religious and cultural backgrounds, Dr. King, obviously a black Baptist minister, and Rabbi Heschel, a Jewish theologian and Holocaust survivor, they found deep common ground in their shared commitment to justice, human dignity, and spiritual activism. Rabbi Heschel and Dr. King both saw civil rights not just as a political issue, but as a spiritual and a moral imperative, with Heschel famously saying that marching with Dr. King was like praying with my feet. Now, perhaps the most iconic part of their friendship was when Heschel marched with King in the 1965 Selma to Montgomery March, and he walked arm in arm in protest of racial segregation and black voter suppression. And just weeks before Dr. King's assassination, Rabbi Heschel introduced him at a major conference in 1968 and referred to him as a, quote, voice of vision and a way. It is said that both men admired one another's intellect and courage and leadership. King respected Heschel's scholarship and his prophetic voice within Judaism, while Heschel saw Dr. King as a modern-day prophet in the tradition of the Hebrew Bible. Lastly, I was reading a story of the King's family that they mentioned that they had attended a Passover Seder at Rabbi Heschel's home. And just thinking about this, what this could have looked like, I think it's a beautiful indication that these two spiritual giants weren't just colleagues, but they were also friends outside of their activism. In this week's Parshat Ha'azinu, we hear this haunting, poetic farewell of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moses is singing us his last song. It's a song that is a both warning and a testament. It's a final gift, if you will, to all the people that he has led through deserts, rebellions, and revelations. And then comes the chilling moment that echoes throughout the Torah. Every time I read it, it gives me chill bumps. God says, quote, go up to the Abarim range to Mount Nebo in Moab. God's telling Moshe to cross the Jericho and view Canaan. I am giving the land to the Israelites as their own possession. There on the mountain that you have climbed, you will die there and be gathered to your people, just as your brother Aaron died on Mount Hor and was gathered to his people. Moses, the greatest prophet in our tradition, the one that spoke to God face to face, is told that he will not enter the promised land. He is told that he will only see it from afar, but he'll never get to walk the actual soil. Now, why doesn't Moses get to enter the land? Well, after all he's done, after all the sacrifices that he's made, the burdens he's borne, shouldn't he be allowed a moment of rest in the place that he spent his whole life walking toward? The Torah gives us a reason, though it feels almost secondary by the time we read it. It's the striking of the rock. Remember that? Hashem says it was because, quote, at the waters of Meribah Kadesh in the desert of Zin, Moses did not uphold God's holiness amongst the Israelites, and he struck the rock. But famous Jewish commentators like Ramban and Rav Soloveitchik, they suggest that Moses' death on the mountain is not a punishment, but rather a paradigm. Moses represents a different kind of leadership, the visionary who sets the course but knows he won't finish the line. He won't ever cross. It's like a parent who plants a tree they won't ever see it bloom. Moses shows us that the mission of a leader is to empower others to arrive. He dies with the clearest vision of the land, and yet he steps aside so that other people can walk into it. Similarly, on the night of April 3rd, 1968, in a church in Memphis, Tennessee, Dr. Martin Luther King delivered what would be his final sermon ever. King stood on the pulpit, wary but defiant, after years of marching, preaching, and dreaming a dream that felt almost biblical in scale. Interestingly, King's last sermon that night was about this very Parshat, and he spoke at length about this idea of Moses not being able to enter the land. A feeling, he said, resonated with him that night. King is quoted as saying, quote, "I just want to do God's will, and he's allowed me to go up to the mountain, and I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. But I may not get there with you. But I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land." It's as if King knew this would be the last sentiment he would ever share with his congregation, because he was assassinated literally the next day. I always get chill bumps when I hear about this story, because King not only invokes Moses' words, he identifies with him as a person. He understood that a leader's greatness is not in completing the journey, but in helping others believe they will complete it, even if that means sacrificing your own ego or status, and perhaps even sacrificing your own life itself. Martin Luther King Jr., like Moses, knew that his life's work would become bigger than his actual life. He knew that the promised land of justice, equality, and dignity was visible but not yet accessible in America. He stood on the mountaintop of history and dared to believe that others would carry the dream forward for him. And so he did not despair at the idea that he might not see it fulfilled. Like Moses, he found peace in the clarity of purpose. Our tradition doesn't end with Moses' death. It continues through Joshua, through the people, through every generation that picks up the torch. In the same way, King's death was not the end of the civil rights movement. It was the deepening of its call. As I mentioned earlier, this Parshat is called Ha'azinu, but what I didn't tell you is that it means to listen. Your oznei, or your ears, it really means give ear. Moses calls heaven and earth to witness his final words, but Moses' real plea is to us. Carry these words forward. Don't forget. Every generation stands where Moses stood, looking at a future we may not fully enter, but with the power to shape it for those who will. We should ask ourselves, what dreams are we living for that others died for? What injustices remain that require our courage? What mountaintops do we see in the distance, and who will help us reach them? I have read that both King and Heschel drew inspiration from the Hebrew prophets, namely Isaiah, Amos, Micah, as sources for their activism. Heschel's writings oftentimes paralleled King's emphasis on justice, compassion, and the moral responsibility to confront deep evil. Well, it's my opinion that on the final night of his life, while King might have stood in a Christian church, he spoke somewhat like a Jewish prophet. He saw in Moses not just a religious figure, but a model of leadership, hope, and sacrifice. So now we should read Ha'azinu not with sorrow, but with awe, that one life can carry so much weight, and that even death does not silence a true prophetic voice. Like Moses, like King, may we be inspired by their vision. May we hear the call of Ha'azinu in our own lives, and may we too help our people reach the promised land. Shabbat Shalom.